Hey everybody, welcome to class. We'll just be starting in a minute or a couple minutes, 5 minutes, 4 minutes. But welcome, and we had a good weekend. Today our plan is to go into our review session for the midterm that's happening this week. So we'll just go over that study guide that I mailed out to everybody. Hi guys, hi Adeline, Kayla, everyone else. Hi there, Alex and Melissa. Hey.
Hello?
Hello? Oh, sorry. You know what? Oopsie. I have this other thing open already. Hey, yeah. Who is this?
This is Nasser.
Okay, well, go to the YouTube. We're not really using this right now. Let me end this. YouTube Live. Thank you. Sorry, everybody. A little confusing. I had a student that was still in the office hour. But anyways, yeah. Hello. Hi, Kenny. Hello. See everyone. Hey guys. So it's fine for me either way, Lena. You can write it handwritten and scan or send a photo. And if you don't want to do that, then you can just send me a document file in any type of format. Yes, today is our review for the test. That's right, Edward. Mm-hmm. Hello, hello. Good to see you guys. Good. Eddie. Crazy boy. What are you doing, Eddie? Good afternoon. Hi. So yeah, just another minute and then it's class time and we'll get started. Hello, Ashley, Flavio, and everyone in the queue. I see you guys. Good afternoon. Looks like Eddie's going to maybe try to join us today. He's been feeling friendly, so always nice. A little company. Yep, hi, one and all. Okay, guys, so welcome back to the class meeting. Appreciate everyone's attendance as usual. It's an important day because, well, today we have our review session for the midterm test. The midterm is Wednesday, next class period. So today you're going to get your chance to go over the study guide with the whole group, and we'll try our best to review all the material one more time so that your head is in the game and that you're ready for this test. On the day of the test, does he know tricks? Yes, Flavio, he does. He can play catch. He can play fetch. If I throw a ball, he's going to run off, and he's going to grab it and come right back to me, like every single time. So he's very, very interesting cat with that. But anyway, yeah, study guide review session day. I sent you guys the study guide, so everyone should know that it's in your inbox, right? Hopefully you guys have had a chance to look at it, download, print, or view it. That's the study guide that it'll be your resource to guide you through all the topics and prepare you for this midterm. The midterm exam, I'm going to distribute it the same way I've done with the quiz. So basically, you're just going to get the exam form mailed to you as a titanium announcement at our class time. And then you have until the expiration of class time to return your answers to me as a attached file. Okay, so you'll simply create an email, put my email address in the recipient line, and attach your file, whether it's a scanned image, whether it's a PDF, document file, Google Doc, or whatever the case is. So you'll have until the 3:45 p.m. time point to just return that back to me, just as you did with the quiz. And then we move on next week to the next chapter of the book and the second half of the semester. Okay, so we're going to go over the study guide. You should all have it. If you don't have it, how about this? I mean, you do in fact have it because I mailed it to everybody. But I'm going to give you the opportunity to look at it by pulling it up on our screen. So give me 2 seconds while I just do that here. It just takes a minute for me to log into this. Okay. All right. So you haven't missed anything yet, Andrew. I'm just telling everybody that it's day of the review session today, and we're going to go over the study guide that I sent out to everybody. We're going to go through it top to bottom as much as we can, so let's just try to dive right in. Here's what I'm doing for you guys, okay? I'm going to do this dual platform. So in the chat, I'm placing a link to a Zoom meeting, and I'm going to conduct the Zoom meeting and this YouTube live session simultaneously. So the reason I'm doing that is because 2 reasons. I want to be able to pull the screen share function up so that we can all focus on the list of study guide questions together. But I also want to keep this lecture recorded in the same archive where all the other lectures are. So I'm just going to let both platforms roll. They'll both be going. You can just view me on either one. But here is the Zoom link for anybody that wants. I'll start that meeting and you can see the screen share function if you like. When you go to the Zoom meeting, just make sure to mute your microphone. Okay. So I see you guys showing up here in this Zoom meeting. There's 14, 15, 16. So just continue to show up, and I'm going to do the share screen thing. You don't need to be in the Zoom meeting to participate or to follow along. It's just a supplement that I'm providing for some that may find it useful. Okay. So to those that are in the Zoom, let me quickly pull up the chat bar here of the Zoom. And I'm going to be looking at your written comments coming in the Zoom chat. So can anybody type in a message there really fast so that we can all see that it's working good? I just said hi. Okay, good. I see you guys. And can you see the screen in your, can you guys see the screen and you can hear me good on the mic so everything's working properly? Okay, let me know in the chat if you have any questions, comments, or anything else. You say that it echoes since you're on both platforms. Okay, well, it's not echoing on my side, I guess. That's just because, so you want me to mute one of them? You guys have to mute one of your 2 things. Go to the platform that you want to mute and just turn the volume down on it, okay? And then there should be no feedback. Are we all good now? Please make it so. All right, so here we're looking at a big study guide. Chapter 8, Chapter 1, Chapter 3, and then Chapter 4. Now the review for Chapter 8 and 1, we've kind of done one time when we got prepared for the quiz that covered Chapter 8 and 1. So we can go back to it, but I do want to make sure to cover everything in Chapter 4. There was just a few things that might not have made it into our lesson last time. So we talked about probability errors, self-fulfilling prophecy, but I don't think we talked about this number 16, correct? The one of us, one of them error. Let me know in the chat. Did it get covered or no? That topic, number 16. Briefly, okay, well, good to remember that it was brief. I'll just summarize it again. One of us, one of them error is what happens. It's a social error. It's when we classify people into categories of us and them, and then we show less respect or consideration for whoever it is that we define as them. This can be done along racial, religious, socioeconomic lines, gender, income level, and so forth. So, I mean, people talk about us, Christians, them, Jews or Muslims, us, Americans, them, immigrants. And when people do that, sometimes they show less respect and concern or regard for people that are outside of their own group. But we need to make sure that we treat everyone equally, that we don't merely dole out, preferential concern based on some artificial grouping of people into a social category of us or them. Now, diffusion of responsibility, I know that was covered briefly at the end. And just a reminder, diffusion of responsibility is when there's a group setting and everyone who's in the group does not feel personal responsibility to take an action, so no action ends up getting taken. Like if I ask this group here, who can tell me what diffusion of responsibility is? If nobody gave an answer, then it would be an example of the concept, because it would be where the whole group of students is waiting for another individual student to give the answer. Kitty Genovese is one example that illustrates this concept. Because if you guys can remember, Kitty Genovese was a person that was murdered in her high-rise apartment complex in Manhattan, New York in the 70s. And as she was crying out for help, a lot of people were surrounding the building and nearby, her neighbors that could hear her actually. It's just that they all made this assumption that since others were around, someone else out of the public group would make a call or intervene, and therefore nobody did. And so we just have to remember to think for ourselves and act as individuals, not fall prey to groupthink, which sometimes can inhibit us from acting even when it's urgent and necessary. And now there's one more here, number 18. Now that one I'm sure we didn't talk about, so I want to make sure I cover it. Therefore, let me just say a word or two about it. So the so-called Asch experiment refers to this scientist, researcher named Solomon Asch. So the Asch experiment, the Asch experiment was a test in the tendency of people to be more or less conformist with other people, to see whether or not social environment could shape a person's judgment and perception. So the way that the experiment was run was they would get, let's say, 6 volunteers to participate. 5 of the 6 volunteers were briefed privately by the research team beforehand and told what answers to give. And the 6th person did not know that the other 5 were confederates of the study. So the thing that they told the 5 people was this: when we come to you, we're going to ask you a seemingly simple question. We're going to ask you to match the length of a standard line to 3 optional line segments. So say this is the standard line. And then the question was, which of these 3 over here is the same length as the standard line? Is it A? Is it B? Or is it C? Okay, now you see the 3 options, can you? Hopefully. I know Eddie's there, but if his head's not blocking it, it's just one simple note. Can we all agree which of the ones is the right answer that matches the standard line? A, B, or do you think it's C? Okay, good. So we're all in agreement, right? It's obviously C. This was not supposed to be the tricky thing. It's supposed to be clear. One's way too short, one's too long. The other one matches approximately the line, that's the standard line. But here's the thing. In Solomon Asch's experiment, which maybe I'll share some point later, a link to some of the footage from it, but what happened was they would take 5 of the recruited subjects and they would have a private moment aside with them. The researcher would say, when we come to you and we ask you this question, we want you to confidently and just almost like it's just so obvious that there's no debate or discussion, it's just automatic. When we come to you and we ask you which one's the correct line that matches this, we want you to all give unanimously the same wrong answer. But make it so that it seems the way you're answering like it's clearly the correct answer. So when they come to the first 5 people, they'll be like, which line matches this? And they would just quickly say, oh, it's definitely letter B. B. What about you? B. And you? Also, yeah, it's B. And then they come to the 6th person, who's the person that is unaware of the other 5 having been coached on the wrong answer. And the whole point of the study was just to look at what that 6th person in this series would say. Would they give the obvious correct answer, which you could just see by looking at it? Or would their judgment be somehow influenced by the unanimous wrong answer of the other members of the group? And what the results actually did show is that something like 75% of people who were in that 6th subject's position gave the wrong answer that agreed with the remainder part of the group. So isn't that funny? If the person was by themselves, then they definitely 100% of the time always give the right answer. But when you put them through this experience of watching everyone else give the same wrong answer, then 3 times out of 4, it causes them to agree with the group and give the same wrong answer. Now, you might be thinking, why is that? It's because they know it's not the right answer, but they just don't want to stand out and be weird. That's not really it. When they debrief them later and they ask, why'd you give that answer? Oftentimes their description of it was, well, everyone else gave a different one. I started to look at it more closely and think maybe my vision is off, and 5 people are all agreeing, so how can I be getting something different from them? So the effect and the influence of a social environment can powerfully shape your judgment and even distort your perception. And so if this can happen within the confines of a silly, psychology experiment like this, judging the length of lines, then so much more easily could it happen, let's say, like in real life. Like if you're a juror and the other 12 jurors are all saying guilty, but you have a different judgment. Are you really going to stand on your judgment, or are you going to acquiesce to the viewpoint of the remaining part of the jury just because they all agree? So we've got to think for ourselves. The Ash experiment shows that a social environment and conformity can powerfully influence the judgments we make and even the perceptions that we end up having. So we've got to be mindful of that as we go around through the world. So that's the Ash experiment. Okay, so just now I've covered the last 2 topics that might not have been fully detailed in the lectures before. But now we can just go back a little bit. Maybe we'll save 8 and 1 for the moment, because I think we have another one of our review sessions on tape from earlier in the semester that covered a lot of that stuff. I want to go over it again, but just to try and make the maximum use of the time that we have here. Let's start with the Chapter 3 information, and then we'll go back to it as needed at the end. Okay, so Chapter 3 is the language and communication chapter, as you guys see. So let's just start off with the first question. We've got a lot of us here, a lot of us participating, so just in the chat, provide an informed answer, and I'll make sure that it's correct, and when we get the right thing, then we'll move to the next. But I like it to be mostly student-driven, these review sessions, rather than me just sort of regurgitating all the information again to you. It's also helpful for you to produce the answer so that you kind of get in the habit of saying and writing it. So let's just say, what is language? Anybody can tell me in the chat. What's the definition of language? So in your notes, or in the book, or in your memory, or in some combination of all 3, this information is found. So go back to those sources, the book, your memory, or these lectures, and let me know, what's language? So I'm looking at our chat on Zoom, and I'm sharing the screen, so you guys will all see the same chat. Okay, Gabby, a system of communication which involves symbols that can be either spoken, written, or nonverbal. Exactly correct. That's what language is. It's a way that human beings communicate one to another. Sometimes it's spoken, as I'm speaking with you. Sometimes it's written, as you see the written symbols here on your display. And sometimes it's nonverbal, which can mean either a tone of voice, hand gestures, or formal sign language, okay? Next up, different functions of language. Now, some of these questions here, they contain more than one item just to kind of make it efficient and economical. So let's go over each point. What's the informative function of language? Let's hear it. Gabby says, true or false statements. Yeah, it's to provide information that is either true or false. So it's using assertions which are either correct or incorrect. I'm telling you that the midterm is on Wednesday. That's an informative use of language that's just providing true information. If I told you that the midterm was last Wednesday, that would be incorrect, false. So informative language is to produce true or false information. What is directive function of language? The directive function of language. Don't let Gabby do the whole thing. Come on, guys. Get in there. Kenny, the use of imperatives to direct or influence behavior. Exactly, good. And that's what it is. If I tell you, tell me what a directive is right now. Tell me what is an imperative. That is a directive use of language. Okay, good. Sit down. Write this down. Put your hands behind your back. Get on the ground. You know, I mean, I'm using some aggressive ones, but those are directive uses of language. Okay, expressive language. I'll just go through that quickly. That's the use of language to convey feelings or emotions and to bring about an emotional response in whoever you're interacting with. So that could be song lyrics, poetry, or anything of the like, which is primarily designed to express feelings instead of to convey literal information or command behavior. Then there's ceremonial language. Ceremonial language is language used in specific official settings like weddings, courtroom, taking an oath of office, and whatever else. Okay, so that's ceremonial use of language. Denotative meaning of a word. What's that? The denotative meaning of a term as opposed to the connotative meaning. Who can tell me about the denotative kind of meaning? What is that? Denotative meaning. Yes, so expresses the properties of the object being or even the word it is symbolizing. It's the same as the lexical dictionary definition. Yes. So the basic point here, the core of the definition or the meaning is that it's a dictionary definition of a term. It expresses the essential defining features of a thing. It doesn't have any positive or negative associations brought into it. Now, connotative meaning is different from that. Connotative meaning is meaning that's based on past experience and associations, and it can be positive or negative. So oftentimes the connotative meaning of a term is not its literal definition. Like, so cool in the denotative sense refers to the weather or temperature condition of something being kind of on the colder side. But cool can have a positive connotation, like a person is cool, like they're just a hip person wearing shades or whatever. Or it could have a negative connotation. Oh, they were really cool to me in terms of the job interview. Like, they weren't so nice. They were not warm and friendly, but cold. So connotative meaning has those past experiences and associations brought to bear. Like the positive connotation of the term cool when it's used as a term of praise is that the person doesn't get flustered or hot and bothered. To say of a person that they're cold and they had a cool demeanor toward me would be to use it with its negative connotation, meaning frigid, cold, and not warm or welcoming. Okay, next up we have stipulative definition. That's easy enough. What kind of definition is that? A stipulative definition is a definition that's given to what type of terms or words in our language. Given to new terms, right, Jamie, that emerged within the language. So, selfie, Wi-Fi, broadband, these are terms that didn't make sense or exist before the era of internet. And so as the world changes, new terms get added to our lexicon, and that is an ongoing process that will continue. Theoretical definitions, that is just the definition of scientific terms. Mass, force, gravity, acceleration. What's an operational definition, anybody? What's that? Operational definition. Let me know. Good, Judy. So when one uses a boundary or a threshold to create standardization, can someone give me an example of an operationally defined concept? A concept that's definition involves a boundary above which a designation does or does not apply. BMI, well, BMI is the metric that is used to give an operational definition of obesity, yes. So if a person has a body mass index above a certain threshold, then that defines them as being in the category obese. There's also a separate BMI threshold for the lower designation, overweight, and so on. All right, so that's one case. To be defined as driving under the influence, the boundary in that case is blood alcohol content of 0.08% or more. To be an adult, the threshold or boundary there is to be over or under the age of 18. Okay, so those are operationally defined concepts. Next, a persuasive definition. Persuasive definition is definition that's given to try and persuade another person to accept or agree with your point of view. And these should be dealt with some manner of skepticism and reluctance, because oftentimes they demonstrate a bias on the part of the one giving the definition, and they don't allow you to come to your own independent conclusions. So like if somebody said abortion is the horrible, destructive murder of a human being, that's a persuasive definition trying to persuade you that it's wrong. In the denotative sense, it would be to intentionally terminate a pregnancy before it goes full term. So, when you hear a persuasive definition, just check yourself a bit before you simply follow and think about whether or not the person's trying to win you to one or the other side of an argument. Okay, now 5 criteria for evaluating a definition. We should be able to say those pretty quickly. Well, what are they? Just throw some of them out there at me. There's 5 points mentioned on that in the book. So yeah, what are these qualities? So neither too broad nor too narrow. That's good, Joshua. Not circular. That's another one. Good, Gabby. So we've got those 2. Furthermore, should avoid emotional language. Yes, that's also correct, Judy. Avoid overly technical and obscure language. And then finally states all the essential attributes. So that is all 5. A good definition would hold all those qualities. So it should neither be too broad nor too narrow, meaning that it should neither provide a definition that includes more things than the term refers to, nor fewer than the term refers to. So if I tell you that a human being is an animal, that's just too broad in terms of what we are, because we're a specific type of animal, and there's many more than just one. If I tell you that a human being is just anybody from California, or any bipedal talking organism from California, then that's getting some of the humans, but not all of them. So a proper definition is going to specify exactly all and only the things that fall under the scope of the term, but neither too many nor too few. A good definition should not be circular, which means that it should not include any mention of the term itself in the definition of the term. If someone's trying to define what a square is, and the definition just says anything that has a square shape, that's a bad definition because it leaves unstated what exactly a square is in the first place. So you can't use the word in its own definition. That's a circular definition, which is not good. The third thing is that it should avoid emotional language. So a good definition does not try to, import to the definition feelings and attitudes about the concept being defined that are not built into the word itself. So to define something as bad, horrible, nasty, rotten, or amazing, wonderful, awesome, spectacular, is to give a definition that is emotionally laden, and it's not the mere denotative meaning of the word. And then last 2 things. A good definition should avoid overly technical and obscure language, because in that case, the definition, even if it is correct, is going to be incomprehensible to anybody that wants to understand the word. And then the last point is that a good definition should state all the essential features or attributes of the thing being defined. If it does not do that, then it's an incomplete definition. So like a definition of square should say that it has 4 sides, but it has to say more than that, because there's more essential attributes to being a square than just having 4 sides. There's also the sides being equal length and having interior angles of 90 degrees and all of that. Okay, so just a little more on language. What about the rhetorical devices? 5 rhetorical devices, that's that next study guide question. So let me know the name of one of them and what it means. What's one of the 5 rhetorical devices? The rhetorical devices are uses of language to manipulate or shape a person's perspective. So sometimes they're manipulative uses of language, but what is one of those 5 rhetorical devices? Okay, so sarcasm, hyperbole, that's 2. There's also what else? Euphemism, very good. Okay, and good example here, Gabby, euphemism. When one replaces a negative or neutral word with a positive one to sugarcoat the truth. Yes, that's what euphemism is. There's also dysphemism, and good, Judy, you say when one replaces a positive or neutral term with a negative one to create disapproval. That's the correct definition, yes. And there was one more. We had sarcasm, hyperbole, euphemism, dysphemism, and then just deception, which can be positive or there could be active or passive deception, yes. So a little bit about hyperbole. Hyperbole is the use of exaggeration or overstatement to distort the facts or to basically mislead. So like a person could give an exaggerated figure in terms of how much money they make, in terms of what kind of education they have. They could exaggerate like how many people attended an event that they held, and that would be all hyperbole. It's good not to use hyperbole because you want people to trust you when it counts. And if you undermine your credibility by saying hyperbolic statements, then sometime in the future when you need people to believe you, they're going to just think that you're overhyping things again. Okay, there's sarcasm, which is the use of caustic irony, ridicule, or taunting to stop critical thought or to ridicule the subject of sarcasm. Like if somebody says, "Oh, awesome job!" Like after you hit something with your car, or bright idea after you do something that was really, really dumb. A person making a sarcastic comment just wants to kind of engage in some light ridicule. Maybe sometimes it's just for fun, but in life, if we do it all the time and we just become these hyper sarcastic people, then we start to lose our ability to even be serious. And when it matters yet again, you might not even know whether you're really serious or just being sarcastic. And then, okay, we see the definitions of euphemism and dysphemism here. What would be an example of a euphemism? Maybe what could it be? Like a person describing, like an old, falling apart musical instrument that barely plays. They say it's got a lot of character. Instead of saying that it's old and tarnished and half broken, it's got a lot of character. A person is belligerent and always talking too loud, but they just call them outgoing, or life of the party or something. So a euphemism is a nicer way of saying something that otherwise might be judged a bit more critically. And then dysphemism is the opposite. So trying to make something seem worse by means of the use of language. So a person, we say they're not smoking cigarettes, those are cancer sticks. The person doesn't have to deal with the estate tax, they'd have to deal with the death tax. The person is not described as being pro-life, but anti-choice. Okay, so those would be dysphemisms. And then deception, active and passive. Active deception is when you say something false to try and mislead the person. Passive deception is when you just don't say the truth and you hold it back so that the person doesn't find it out. That's a lie of omission, as it sometimes is called. But both are deceptive. If I lie about my work history on my job application, then I'm deceiving by trying to conceal facts. If I lie on my work history by adding work experience that I did not have at all, then I'm lying by presenting false information. So you can present false information, that's active deception, or you can withhold or somehow conceal true information, and that's passive deception. Okay, so thanks for all of that. Now, 4 communication styles, and that'll wrap up our review of chapter 3 at least. So what were those 4? If you can remember, let's just get them on this. Passive aggressive, okay, that's one of them. And that helps because there's also the 2 others, aggressive, regular aggressive, and assertive, and then finally just regular passive. Okay, and if you remember, just your job in all these cases is to know those definitions and be able to provide them. So, right, an aggressive communicator only cares about the one thing, just getting their way. And they want to get their way, but they don't care about being nice or maintaining the relationships they have. So they want to get their way at all costs, even if that ends up destroying relationships. The passive person, to the contrary, wants to avoid confrontation and conflict at all costs. And for those folks, if there's any pushback, they back down very easily. And then you've got assertive. Assertive is just being able to say what you want or need calmly, confidently, with self-esteem, but also knowing how to keep it civil and knowing when to back down and moderate your tone if you're doing perhaps damage to the relationship. So assertive people will say what they want or need straightforwardly without any pretense, but they also don't want to be too aggressive or hostile. And then passive aggressive is like the person wants to get their way like an aggressive person would, but sort of like a passive person, they don't want to just come right out and honestly discuss what they want or need. So they'll resort to indirect strategies of manipulation to get things or to work the situation to their favor. So whereas an aggressive person might just come at you full of rage telling you it's time to clean up the house, whereas the passive person might just ignore it or make a very weak, mealy-mouthed attempt to bring it up and then back away immediately. Whereas an assertive person might just lay out the facts, tell you what needs to happen, and give you room to talk, but be firm. The passive-aggressive person would probably not want to bring it up, but they would make mentions of it within earshot or selectively place items so that the picture gets across to you one way or the other. And that's how passive-aggressive people operate. So know your style, know the style of other people, and be willing to be flexible enough to modify that depending on the circumstances that you're dealing with. Okay, so we'll move down a little. Now we're looking at knowledge and the limits of knowledge. That's the most recent chapter, and so let's just review some of it. To start off, what about the definition of knowledge? That's one that you need to know. So what is that? The definition of knowledge is that it's a what. There's three component parts. You'll put that in the chat. Okay, Erica and Gabby, information that we believe, and it is true. But Gabby, the one more part that you didn't put in, but it's up here above by Erica. Oh yes, good. That we also have justification for it. Exactly. So it is a true justified belief, or sometimes rolls off the tongue easier to say JTB, justified true belief, but it's the same. So it's information that we believe, meaning that we think it's true. Second point is that it actually is true, so it's information which provides claims that match the world. And then the third thing is that you have to have justification. What's justification again? The word justification refers to, definition is, in other words, it's just having good evidence or reasons to support a belief. So, like right now, I know that the president has the coronavirus. That's been a crazy weekend, right? So the President Trump has this coronavirus disease, illness, or whatever we call it. How do I know that? Well, I believe it. And I mean, let's say it's true. What's my evidence? Well, the evidence is the reporting that we've all been reading. It's testimonial evidence that we've all received, and now having obtained that, I'm justified in believing it's true, and I do believe it, so I would say I know that. Okay, good. Now, there's two different schools of thought about where most of the knowledge that we have traces from, or what the source of knowledge is usually. One of those perspectives is rationalism, not to be confused with rationalization. But anyway, what is the viewpoint of rationalism? The idea that most knowledge comes from where? Comes from reason, yes. From pure reason and from abstract thought. So that would be the knowledge that we found in areas like just pure mathematics, pure geometry. Notice that when you're thinking right now of the square root of 81, you're not thinking about like anything that you can see, taste, touch, hear, or smell. Or if I ask you to just contemplate the figure of a circle and know that all points lying along the perimeter are equally distant from the radius, that's an idea that you can simply contemplate in the eye of the mind in abstract thought and come to know those things. So some say that most knowledge of humans comes from pure reason and abstract thought, but then there are empiricists who have a different view. In the thought of empiricism, most human knowledge comes instead from where? Not from just pure reason, but the five senses and observation, yeah. So sight, taste, touch, hearing, and smell, plus whatever we can observe with those perceptual faculties that we have. So like right now, I know that like I'm in my house because if I just look around, I can see it, or that if I like think about my elbow over here, I can feel the table where my arm is resting, and so on. So five senses is another primary source of knowledge. Empiricists say that that's where most of it is from. Rationalists say that most of it's from the more abstract kind of ideal use of reason. Okay, so then next, evidence. Overall, evidence is just, I mean, it's kind of interchangeable with justification, but we have defined it as something that can, tell me, what do you know about evidence? What is it? Well, okay, good, Gabby. You're saying where it can come from. But before we go there, Gabby, yes, Judy has it, that it's just anything that can prove or disprove a claim. It's the sort of thing that you'd have to offer to give reasons to believe some claim you're making. So like, for example, is there any evidence that the dinosaurs existed? Yes, there's evidence. It's their fossils that have been dredged up from the earth. So with those fossils, there's good reason to prove or believe that they did exist. To disprove a claim, you can also give evidence, right? Suppose that somebody says, you hit their car, and you say, no, that wasn't my vehicle. You can maybe prove that by showing photographic evidence that there's no indication of a collision happening between the two cars. Or maybe someone has a closed circuit camera that was taping the intersection, and if that tape has been found, it might show that you are not actually the car that was on the scene, and that could disprove the claim. So anyway, evidence is needed. We can't just take claims to be true or false. We need reasons to believe one way or the other, and that's what evidence provides. Now, what are some reliable sources of evidence? That gets more to what you were just talking about, Gabby. There's a couple of basic sources of evidence that we always use. Okay, so good, Adeline. It could be direct experience, like you're literally viewing it or witnessing it or observing it personally in the presence of the thing. Could be testimony. Evidence that is testimonial comes from things that are relayed to you by others, that they either tell you or that they write and report indirectly through like the media or something. So there's testimony, there's your own direct experience. There's also inference. So like inference is a way of gaining knowledge by drawing a conclusion from other facts. If I see a person's fingerprint on a weapon, and I'm like a forensic detective, then I can use inference to determine that this person used that weapon to commit the crime. That's not seeing it myself. That's not hearing testimony. Maybe there were no witnesses. But the evidence that was left behind includes the fingerprint. And by using the fingerprint, I can infer the identity of the perpetrator, perhaps. And then memory is sort of a way of preserving the past information that we've taken in by any of these other sources. So like right now, memory is the thing that allows you to know what you ate for dinner last night. It's none of the other three sources. I mean, initially it was the experience of eating it, but now that experience is over, so memory preserves it. A lot of things we can't remember. What did you have for dinner on September the 7th of 2018? I mean, maybe you'll be able to go back to the records, find photos you took back then or something to jog your memory, but without the memory or any other surviving evidence of it, it's pretty much lost. So memory helps us, but it's not perfect. And we come back to that later, I guess. So anyway then, next I want to ask you guys about the qualities that can be used to assess the quality of an expert's testimony. So say you're interacting with an expert of some type, and you're trying to judge how much trust to give to the words and statements they're making. So what are 4 things that could be used to come up with that judgment of the credibility of the expert? We mentioned these 4 points of evaluation. Yeah, so there's education, experience, reputation, and accomplishment. With all these different concepts, remember that you'll have to give a definition as well in a lot of cases, right? So it wouldn't be good enough to just say the words. You have to expand on those words and tell me what they mean. But yeah, like so education, how much education, from where, and what level of attainment? Experience, how much professional experience in the field does the person have apart from their education from whatever level? Reputation, how are they regarded by others within their profession or field? Do they have a upstanding reputation, or are they looked down upon by their peers and colleagues? And finally, accomplishments. Does the individual have awards, publications, or titles that give further credibility to their testimony and their opinion? Looking at these 4 factors can allow you to make relative judgments between different experts as to which ones are more or less worthy of your trust and credence. Okay. So next there is a mention, this question, well, this item number 8, of some unreliable sources of evidence that we are better off kind of having some doubt or skepticism about. One of them there is anecdotal evidence. So tell me about that. What is anecdotal evidence overall? It's evidence of a kind, but it's not the best evidence. Where does it come from? What's it based on? Anecdotal evidence. What do you think? Yeah, so one person's personal experience. It doesn't necessarily need to be your own. It could be yours, or it could be another person who conveyed their experience to you. But the problem with anecdotal evidence is that it's just not widespread enough to give you a fair judgment about what to expect. One person who bought a Tesla car says, you know, my car broke down a couple months into owning it, and it's just been repair after repair since then. So I would advise you not to get such a car. That's my experience. I'm making that up. Actually, my brother Danny, he just got a Tesla over the summer. He's loving it. It's like, you can't drive it enough. But anyway, like, so say hypothetically that another person didn't like their experience. After that, you know, you might take that experience they provided you, that anecdote, and you run with it. You're like, well, that must be true because my one close friend or whoever said that. The problem is that you always have to balance anecdotal evidence against the widespread report of a consensus. And if it's contradicted by a scientific or a professional or even consumer consensus, then you might not be so well served by just relying on the anecdote. So anecdotal evidence is unreliable because it could be biased to a particular experience that's not revealing of the general case. Then hearsay is another kind of basically unreliable evidence. What is hearsay evidence, if anyone can tell me about that one? Yeah, so it's testimony that passes through several others before it gets to you. And problematic feature of hearsay is that information, when it changes hands a lot of different times, inevitably certain accurate facts get lost, or distorted and misrepresented elements of the information get added. So the further you are from the original events, the less accurate the information is that finally reaches you. So we should always have a little fair-minded skepticism of hearsay. Okay then, next there's this CRAP test, so-called, C-R-A-A-P. These are 5 letters that form an acronym, and they're each supposed to refer to one thing you might use to evaluate a piece of information. So let's just go letter by letter. The first letter is C. What would that point of evaluation be? Okay, so I see it all there. Adeline, you gave it all. So currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, purpose. And I see, Joshua, you've added a note about currency, which is good. Currency means how recent is the information that you're now looking at. Is it more or less recent? The more recent, usually the better. So outdated, old information or facts can sometimes no longer really bear on the topic that we're investigating or analyzing today. So currency matters. The more current, the better. The letter R for relevance. That just means, is the information related to, relevant to, the subject that you're trying to do research or learn about? Sometimes people bring up information when they're trying to learn about something, but the information they refer us to has nothing to do, and it's not even relevant to the topic. So make sure the information is relevant. And then third letter is A for authority. That means who gave this information and what expertise or authority do they have to even talk about this topic? A lot of people have very powerful opinions on subjects that they're no expert on. In some cases, people have powerful opinions on subjects that they're not even a novice about. So you should consider the source. Where's the information from, and does it come from an authoritative expert or not? If it doesn't, then why would you place so much credibility in it? The person themselves hasn't taken any effort to become an authority on it, so how can they give you information that you then trust? Okay, accuracy. That is all just about how accurate, how factual, how reliable the information is. Is it true to fact? Does it purport to be? That's obviously of the first importance. And then purpose, the letter P. That means what's the reason the information was created? Was it created to sell products? Was it created to win ideological support, to win votes? Was it just given to provide neutral information? Like, sometimes I'll see people that are promoting these fad diets and stuff, and then they'll say, well, here's the reason that I know it's a good diet, because look at this YouTube video, and you go to some person's TED Talk, but then if you look at who it is that's giving the talk, they're selling you a diet plan. So the reason they gave the information was to basically profit off of the sale of this so-called diet plan. Knowing the purpose the information was given will also have provided you insight as to how much trust you really think you should give it or not. Okay, so that's the crap test. Thanks, everybody. So next, research resources. In Chapter 4, they talked a little bit about where are some good places that you can often go to just get information on a subject that you want to learn more about or do research on. So who can throw some of those out there that we listed? They're in the book. Okay, library, just the old school physical library. The internet, yes, although beware of false and misleading info on the internet. Academic journals, a third good source. Government documents, yes, and then expert interviews. Good, so I think that's pretty much it. If you want to learn something in this world, you're going to go to one of those sources. You're either going to talk to a professor or another professional who works on that material or is in the field, or you'll go out to like an actual library and check the catalog or request materials from there. Or you will do research on government information that's been provided to the public, either officially or declassified. You might do research in an academic journal provided by those that work in that academic specialization and that are always vetted and peer-reviewed. Or you might simply hop on the internet and do your own internet research. But as before, be careful not to find your way into dark corners of the internet where people just disseminate false or misleading claims. Okay, so that's good. And then next, this War of the Worlds broadcast. So right as the book starts talking about errors in perception and thinking, cognitive and perceptual errors, they make mention of this War of the Worlds broadcast to sort of set the stage and get the topic on the table. So who can tell me just basics about that broadcast? Anybody know, like, what was said, what year, or what we learned from that? So yeah, War of the Worlds broadcast. What's the basic thing there? Okay, Joshua, the guy talked about aliens on the radio. It was October 30th, 1938. Yeah. It's a little less than perfectly specific, but that's a good starting point. So, guy talked about aliens on the radio. So what? So why are we still talking about it today? What really happened? We're getting there, but if you could just reveal a little more detail, that'd be awesome. Okay, so people actually believed what they were saying. Yeah, good. So imagine there's radio and there's no TV, so you can't get visual news yet unless you go to the movie theater and watch newsreels in the theater. This is what they used to do. But before there were televisions, people did have radios, and the radio would usually broadcast in the evening, news, sports, and entertainment. So like if you tuned into an entertainment broadcast, they might be voice acting the plot of a novel or something, and that's what this was. It was a science fiction novel called War of the Worlds, and they were just trying to put something fun on TV, I guess, or sorry, radio for people to listen to. Interesting, it was October 30th. Does that mean that it was sort of to spook people out because Halloween was the next day? I didn't really think of that before, but maybe. Anyway, here it is October of 2020, so it's 82 years later. But back then, people had radios. So imagine the people tuning in too late to notice that this was just a fictional entertainment broadcast, thinking that they were hearing the news, like real news. And so hearing the broadcaster say, the aliens are coming, they're on the air, they're on the horizon, they're invading, they're taking us over. Some people got into a state of panic, and because of the heightened state of suggestibility they were in, many people even thought they could see these flying saucers if you just squinted and looked really hard into the horizon. So a big takeaway lesson, I guess, is that our social influences can and do powerfully shape the way we perceive reality. Things that we would never have thought, except for the influence of a social environment, can easily be instilled within us. And so we owe it to ourselves to kind of provide a check against the automatic assumption that information we first encounter has to be true, or that we should trust uncritically what we think we're perceiving or hearing. Okay, now, from there's a whole bunch of different cognitive and perceptual errors that are listed. So, One thing though, there's one of them in here that I guess I should add. I'm going to tell you guys right now in the chat, but like for example, sorry, I can't really type, sorry. That's one that I did intend to include in this list, so just adding it. But anyway, let's go over some of these errors that are listed there, and that's the end of the Chapter 4 review. We covered this stuff here from 17 through 19, so we just have a couple items. Okay, so starting off, memorable events error. What could that be? What is the memorable events error? You'll let me know. Memorable events error. Okay, so Judy. Sorry, below that, the next statement you have. One places more importance on an event than it deserves, just because the event is uncommon or memorable. Exactly. So uncommon, unusual events that stand out from the norm, they kind of get imprinted more vividly into our mind. And sometimes because of that, we place more importance on them than they really should have. An example of this that's mentioned in our book is the concept of fear of flying versus fear of driving. Now, fear should really be proportional to the threat that you face. So something more dangerous, you should feel more fear. Less dangerous, you should feel less fear. But when it comes to driving versus flying, flying is the safer mode of travel than driving, just taking it as a function of how many people travel versus how many people are fatally injured. Did anyone get the question he added? What, you mean false memory? Erica, is that the question? Yeah, we're going to talk about false memory, but I'm doing memorable events error for the moment, which is 12. Yeah? I added number 13, correct. Yes. I added false memory, which is number 13. Oh, it's also number 6. Oops. Okay, my bad. Thank you, guys. I just didn't notice that I had skipped it above. So we don't need it to appear twice. Very good catch. Thanks for your keen focus on that. But look, it's twice on the list. It's also number 6, so I did not mean to double include it. I thought that I omitted it. As it turns out, I did not omit it, but I placed it above where it ought to occur in the list. But that's fine, because of course the questions you're going to get are going to be in random order, not in this like chronological order of the book. Memorable events there. All I was saying is that it's more dangerous to fly than drive. Sorry, opposite. Please let me correct that. More dangerous to drive than to fly. And yet people are more scared of flying than driving. Why? Because a plane crash is less common, and so we're not used to it. Car crashes happen every day all the time, and so we kind of are numb to that, which means that we're not as afraid of the more common occurrence of danger, but we are more afraid of the less common occurrence of danger, even though it's way less likely to actually hurt us. So just make sure that you don't assign more importance to something just because it's rare or uncommon. Okay, next, misperception of random data. What's that one? What's the misperception of random data concept? When you think that you see a pattern or order in something, but there's more. But what? Because there can be pattern in some things, but it's an error. It's only an error when the thing is actually random. Good. Maybe some of you guys have ever heard of like a Rorschach test. Okay, this is like something that they do in like clinical psychology, where they show you like a random blot of like ink on a canvas or a page, and they say, "What do you see here?" And someone would be like, "Oh, I see like my mom yelling at me or something." You know, it's supposed to unveil like deep aspects of the person's unconscious and so forth. Now, whatever. The point is that just something random, like a random splatter of paint or ink, can be transformed by the mind into something that has pattern, order, structure, and it means something. And the brain likes to create order even where there is none. So we do this quite often, trying to find order or a pattern in something that's just random. It could be seeing the face of a human figure in the clouds, just the random accumulation of water ions in the Earth's atmosphere, or thinking that you see like a demonic figure in a mushroom cloud from an explosion or whatever. But those are just random. So that's misperception of random data. Okay, then probability error. That's not too bad. What is the probability error? That's just when, what happens? when you miscalculate the likelihood of an event, right? When you miscalculate the odds or the chance that something could happen, the probability, in other words. You can overestimate or underestimate the probability of something happening. Yeah, so maybe we'll get back to that at the end. There was a little, did we get to do the exercise in class where, I think we got tripped up on that, right, because the chat dropped out during the live cast last time. And I was going to go through this little exercise where we checked on birthdays, so maybe we'll come back to that. But anyway, probability error. You can underestimate or overestimate the likelihood of something. A straightforward example is somebody gambling and thinking that the odds are changing depending on the past outcomes of the roulette wheel or whatever. The next trial of the roulette wheel bears the same probability of landing red or green as all the other trials did. It's not possible that green is hot or that the law of averages mean we're bound to have black. So I should have said red and black. Those are the two dominant colors. Green, there's only 2 slots on the roulette table. But anyway, miscalculating the odds. Up here, false memory. Now we can just briefly talk about the false memory. False memory is when one person thinks they have a memory of an event, but it didn't actually happen, or it didn't happen the way they thought that it did. And that is actually something that is also common, and it's the leading cause of mistaken conviction in the law, inaccurate eyewitness testimony. So sometimes even when we have memories or think we have them, we have to double check with other available sources of evidence because the memories that we have are not perfect. It's not like, I know some people say they have got photographic memory, and so there's better and worse for sure. But since there's the possibility of error and failure with memory, we have to keep that in mind even as we consult with what we think has happened in the past in our mind. Okay, self-fulfilling prophecy. What is that? Let me know. What is the self-fulfilling prophecy? Okay, so when your expectation of an event ends up causing that event to end up happening. Yes, exactly, Joshua and Erica. This sometimes occurs when you have a negative expectation, and then that expectation causes your behavior to follow towards that outcome. If I think I will fail a class, and that's what I expect, then maybe I'll withdraw my engagement from the class and stop focusing on the readings and the assignments. Thus, the expectation has caused me to prepare less adequately, and that might lead to the failure that I was expecting in the outset. If 2 people think that the other is going to attack them, like, I don't know, then they might be so defensive that they act in a way that is perceived by the other party to be provocative, and that ends up leading to a fatal encounter between them just because both sides expected it to occur. So self-fulfilling prophecy, don't rope yourself into a negative outcome by coming into the situation armed with irrational negative expectations. Await the evidence before you draw overly hasty conclusions about the way things are likely to play out. All right, now, if we go up, you'll see the stuff from our first 2 chapters of the book, and we've gone over a lot of that already. Important things, just to highlight, I mean, I'm still asking questions on everything. It's totally cumulative, right? I just kind of wanted to focus today on the latter 2 chapters because we had another review session in which we did discuss these things, and it's been more focused on earlier. But just a sample of some of those first 2 chapters yet again. What is the definition of a deductively valid argument? What is that? I definitely will include a question about something on that topic of deductive validity, since it's just so fundamental to the whole, concept of logic. So what does it mean when an argument is deductively valid? Let's see. If all the premises are true, then the conclusion must also be true. Good. That's correct, Erica, Gabby, and Judy, but Alexis, not exactly, no. It does not mean the premises are true, because you can have valid arguments that are not sound, okay? Like if I say all human beings live in Australia, Alexis is a human being, and therefore Alexis lives in Australia, that's a valid argument. Yes, that's a valid argument, even though, no, not every human being lives in Australia, so the first premise is false. Why is it valid then? It's valid because of the logic that is transmitted from the premises to the conclusion. That conclusion is just a logical consequence of the two premises, so it's valid but not sound. Now, to that point though, what is it when an argument is sound? What's a sound argument? Now you can tell me about that. When an argument is sound, what does this mean? What are we saying about it then if it's sound? Just tell me. Okay, good. So Erica, Judy. Sound argument is an argument that is deductively valid and which has all true premises. Correct. So, good. Would the example I just gave be sound? No, because it says all humans live in Australia. Alexis is a human, so she lives in Australia. That's not sound because the first premise is false. What could be a sound argument? Someone throw out an example. An argument that is valid and is sound. Let's see if you generate one. With like 100 of us here, it shouldn't be too bad. So I'm just waiting in the chat to see your example of a sound argument. Not all at once, thanks. Just one at a time if you could. Give me an example. Okay. Erica, no president has walked on the moon. True. Trump is the president, also true. Therefore, Trump has not walked on the moon. Yes, that's valid, because if the two premises are true, then the conclusion has to be. But it's also sound because those are two true statements as those two premises. Okay. Now keep in mind, if you have an argument that you're going to write on the exam, it has to be in standard form, so it could not look like this on the page that you're submitting. In other words, the sentences have to be on separate lines. They have to be in a list, and each one on its own separated line in that list, with a horizontal line in between the premises and the conclusion below. So keep standard form. Yes, you have to do standard form. That's important. Okay, so what about inductive arguments? What's an inductively strong argument? What does that mean? For an argument to be inductively strong, it just has to be that what? An inductively strong. No, it's not either A or B. That's not the case. No, sorry, Gabby. Wrong example. Inductively strong. No, not to worry. We'll get to that, though, in a bit. But what would be an inductively, what's the concept or the definition of an inductively strong argument? Not deductive validity, inductive strength. Brittany, if the premises are true, then the conclusion is highly likely to be true. Yes, that's correct. Exactly. So, I don't know. Like, say a person has gone to bed before midnight every night of the year. That means that tomorrow they'll also go to bed before midnight. So what we're just doing is like drawing a conclusion from some assembled facts that make the conclusion seem like it's probable. But of course, the pattern could be interrupted or break. And that's why an inductive conclusion can't guarantee, the inductive argument can't guarantee the conclusion will be true, but more often than not it would be. So I don't know, in our history as a country, the United States, every 4 years we've had an election going back for hundreds of years. So it's the 4th year in the cycle now, thus we'll have an election this year, which, you know, is very probable based on long pattern over time. But it could always, I guess, something random could happen such that, you know, there's a breakdown in the functioning of democracy. Okay, so that's inductively strong and some examples. Now just keep in mind all the different types of valid forms of deductively valid argument, like 16, 17, 18, 19, they're all about those. So disjunctive syllogism is known as the argument from elimination. That's the one that says either A or B, not A, and so therefore B. And you'd plug in, you know, English example for that. Modus ponens is one of the 3 hypothetical syllogisms. So the 3 examples of hypothetical syllogism are modus ponens, modus tollens, and the chain argument. Modus ponens is the if A then B. A, so therefore conclusion B, affirming the antecedent. Modus tollens, if A then B, not B, and so therefore not A. and the chain argument. If A, then B. If B, then C. So therefore, if A, then C. Okay. Keep in mind the definitions of what the parts of an argument are, what are some conclusion and premise indicator words, and what are the different types of sentences as well. Chapter 1, we've had our quiz, so a lot of that's familiar to you, I hope, but the Milgram study, that's the one about the shocks, and obedience was being tested to see how people would be willing to disobey or follow orders, even if what they were being asked to do is clearly wrong. The Zimbardo experiment or Stanford prison study, that's the simulated prison in the basement of Stanford psychology department in 1971. And the way that the experiment had to be discontinued prematurely shows again the power of a social environment where some have control over others and loose guidelines with which to conduct their authority. The 3 stages of cognitive development: dualism, relativism, commitment. Remember those and what each one involves. Confirmation bias, that is only seeking information that verifies or confirms what you already believe to be true. Qualities of a good critical thinker. So, this one I kind of just collapsed a bunch of definitions into one, but, on a test I might ask you about one or the other just specifically. But analytical skills, being able to find support for your beliefs, effective communication, knowing how to speak, write, and listen well. Inquiry skills, knowing how to do research and where to find information for the purposes of research. Flexibility, being open-minded enough to change your plans or mind if and when it's needed. Open-minded skepticism, not believing in anything unless there's proof beyond reasonable doubt, but keeping an open mind otherwise. The method of doubt given by René Descartes, that's to assume that things are false unless they can be proven beyond all possibility of doubt. So assuming that things are false if there's any chance for it to be doubted. Collaborative learning, working well with others to form shared solutions to common problems, and then creative problem solving, being able to come up with creative or imaginative solutions to complex problems, sometimes by improvising, and in other cases by having contingency plans established in advance. It's important in a democracy because we vote, and being a good critical thinker helps you weigh the issues and the arguments that make your vote an informed and wise vote. Let's see, 3-tier model of critical thinking: experience, interpretation, analysis. Experience, what happened. That's just the first part of it. What happened, not really why. At the interpretation stage, you're now trying to go on and explain why or how. And the analysis stage is where you return to the last interpretation to question it and see, is there any better interpretation out there that could be given. And then there's, mention here of the obstacles to critical thinking and the forms of narrow-mindedness too. And then rationalization and doublethink. So you'd have to, be clear about the meaning of all those concepts as well. Avoidance, avoiding people, situations, and ideas or information that disagrees with your views. Anger, having an emotional, angry reaction to people who present ideas that are different from yours, that just disagree. Cliche, overused common phrases that discontinue critical thought, like it is what it is, or agree to disagree, or just whatever. Denial, denying alternative views before even considering them. Ignorance, choosing to stay uninformed about things so you don't have to make decisions or take actions. Conformity, taking the view of the majority or the popular crowd just to fit in. Struggling, a never-ending debate as to what action or position to take, which never reaches a conclusion. And then there are these different isms that are bad. So absolutism, having no ability to stand up to authority, always assuming they're totally correct. Egocentrism, being self-centered, thinking you're better than others and smarter, and therefore you have no respect for others. Ethnocentrism, false, unjustified belief in the superiority of a person's race, group, or culture. And then anthropocentrism, the view that mankind is the only thing that matters and that it is the middle of everything, and non-human animals and nature don't matter. Rationalization is to create an explanation for something that you did on impulse, but to create that explanation later on after the fact. And then doublethink is just to believe two opposite things at the same time. So I mean, we've really covered most all the material. kind of a quick crash course, just review. So I hope that helps you guys. I don't think I have much more to do for us for today, but on Wednesday we're taking that exam. So next meeting is the day of the midterm. Be ready to just receive my test form at 2:30 tomorrow. Check the titanium announcements in your email inbox and you'll have it. And then you'll just have until the end of our class period to return your answers back to me. It's going to have a few more questions than the quiz. The quiz is 17 or so, and this is going to be closer to like 27 or something like that. But I'll take from the questions and the topics that are referred to here. So if you've got your book, you go to this review session, you go back to your notes, and just study. You should be in okay shape. But that's all I had for this review session. So let me know. Any additional thoughts, comments, questions, anything at all, let me know over there in the chat if so. You guys are good. You submit it through email, not titanium. That is correct, yes. I don't want to use titanium because things get lost, things get rerouted to servers that don't end up sending. I've had too many experiences like that, so the best way is to just use email. And it is the same format as the last quiz, yes, Gabby, where you'll have some examples, definitions, and short answers that you'll have to provide for each question. Okay, so I'm going to close the two streams separately. I'm going to start by closing this Zoom meeting, and then the YouTube live is still running. So for those on Zoom, I'll see you guys on Wednesday, and you can contact me by email for anything between now and then. So have a great one, and I'll talk to you soon. And on YouTube, I see that there's still a bunch of us here on YouTube, so hello everybody. I'm looking at you through this feed. Take it easy, and I'll see you soon, okay? You guys are still there, a couple of you. See you then. And yeah, I see a couple of the examples that were provided here on this chat. You don't need to delete them because they'll remain as a permanent record for those who view this later, so they can always be of use. I just felt like, you know, more is better, so let's give you guys every option. All right then, so take care, all right? I'll see you back on Wednesday. Have a great day.